Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending. Powerful reading, powerful discussions. So, Carla Weinhold is here today. Carla, did I say that right?
You did say that right.
Great. First time. That's awesome. Carla teaches middle school social studies in Maryland, and she's a national board certified teacher since 2007 in literacy. So she's a perfect fit for this session. I'm excited to learn from her. She's taught elementary also, grades 1 through 4, as well as middle school and social studies, as well as middle school social studies, sorry. So this is going to be an excellent session, and I know that you have control of the screen. Um, Carla, so I'm going to go ahead and hand the session over to you.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Hi, everyone. I'm Carla Weinhold, so I teach about 30 miles north of Baltimore. This year, I am a 7th grade social studies teacher. This is my 21st year teaching, 12th year teaching social studies at the middle school level. So I come with a variety of background. So, okay, let's see. Trying to get my slides to go. There we go. So my goal for you today and tonight is to have you think about the discussions that you're having with your students in your classroom. Think about who's driving the discussions that you're having. Are they teacher-led? Are the students taking control? What role are your students playing in preparing for the discussion? Is everything that they're doing to prepare coming from you, or do they have that ability to prepare kind of open-ended? And then look at, are all your kids participating? Is it that same few students that are participating and asking the questions? And then do your students know how to have a discussion? So we're going to talk about some of those throughout the webinar tonight. And then another goal for me, being a classroom teacher, I always want people in a session that I'm leading to walk away with something that they can take back to their classroom, even as early as tomorrow, to use with their students. So hopefully we'll find something, a new discussion technique, something maybe you've heard but not tried that you can take back. Because having conversations and having your students participate in discussions and conversation can enhance what they're learning and connect them to the curriculum that they're studying. If you have any questions while we're working tonight, there's the chat feature. Melissa's going to be monitoring for us and letting me know if a question arises. So feel free to comment as you need to, and we can stop and address any questions that come up. So I want you to take a minute and think about your classroom. Think about the last couple discussions that you might have had. And I want you to take a minute to think about that with this quote. Now, with the quote still in mind, I want you to think about your life outside the classroom. Think about your conversations with your friends, your family, your colleagues, and think about this quote in that sense as well. I'm sure that many of us can think of situations that we either were part of or observing where you were hearing the person speak, or people were hearing you speak, but they're not really listening to what you're saying. They're not connecting to the words. It always makes me think of my parents. My dad is the practical engineering type thinker. He listens to tell you the solution. Whether or not you want a solution or not, that's what he's listening for. While my mom always comes into situations as the thinker and the feeler, she always wants to show empathy and understanding. So when I think in society, in our classroom, there's a purpose for both, and we want to help our students learn how to listen to be able to reply or connect with what the other classmates are saying. The next thing I want to show you is actually a Chinese character that I actually found on Pinterest. I've come across it several times in the last couple years, but it's very powerful to make us think about and see that listening is something we do with all of our senses. I usually share this with my students towards the beginning of the year, especially when we're starting to have discussions, to say that they have to be watching and feeling and thinking and connecting with what we're saying. So I think a lot of our children don't get a chance to be heard. They don't know how to react or comment politely when somebody is sharing an opinion that might be different their opinion. So I think that it's important as teachers that we give them the opportunity and the tools that they can have productive conversations with people, whether they agree or disagree. So the next thing I want to show you is a bookmark that I got from Teach Thought. I use this with my students because they don't always know how to have a discussion. It seems like a simple question. Have you taught your students how to discuss? I planned all these fabulous lessons, gave them the text I wanted them to read, gave them some think about questions. But when we were having our discussions, it didn't seem to go the way I had pictured it in my mind. So I had to step back and think about, what am I not giving them to help them be successful? So as I became more experienced as a teacher, as I went to more professional development sessions, I realized I didn't teach them how to discuss. We teach them how to answer questions. We teach them how to solve problems, but I didn't teach them how to discuss. I just assumed they knew how to ask questions of each other. I thought they knew how to politely see somebody else's point of view, but they didn't. And I know that I'm not the only teacher who's gone in this situation. So I started using this bookmark, and I started teaching my students with mini lessons on how to have a discussion. I do a lot of modeling, especially with middle school students. They need to see it and experience it. And I model the language. I model the words that I want them to use, and these sentence starters help them do that. I see it differently because it's a very polite way for someone to say, I acknowledge what you're saying, but yet I look at it this way. So it gives them the words to be able to have that thoughtful conversation without turning it into an argument and making it necessarily a personal attack on the person who's sharing. I also, with my students, make sure that they have the time to prepare. I want them to be able to read the document, look at the primary source, whatever I'm having them do, really look at that source multiple times before they need to participate, allowing them time to take notes, annotate on it, comment on it, whether it's with sticky notes, whether it's with electronic notes, or actually handwriting the notes on them. I want them to actually have that time to prepare. So I'm going to show you a couple lessons that I've done with my students over the last several weeks with some different kinds of options and grouping. So the first one I did, this is with decision making within Active Classroom. And I like the decision making text because it has two different levels. So if you look at the image on the left, you can see it's kind of simpler text, it's numbered for them, but the image on the right is showing the higher level text, definitely more word-based. The one on the left is a little bit smaller, just so I can show you some of the highlighting things that I did. So what I used for my students is we use the Scholastic Reading Inventory, the SRI. I then group them by students who are struggling readers and students who are a little bit more successful with reading or above. So I assigned them the text, so they just, when they got the assignment, completed the assignment that they needed. Another feature of Active Classroom that makes it really nice, if they're a struggling reader, it has the Read To feature. So they can get that verbal fluency and understanding from somebody else reading the text to them. Active Classroom is nice in the fact that if it's a reading, it'll give you the Lexile level. So you can see what's going to be the best for your particular students, for their reading level, to let them have success. If they don't have success with the article or with the source, they're not going to be an active participant in the discussion. So we need to set them up for success first. So what you see on the screen are pictures of some of my students in the first stage of the lesson. So the decision-making lessons I break into multiple parts. So they have, in the picture on the left is when they're just starting out, they're reading. You can see in the other pictures that are closer in the screen, they actually had to highlight the positive and negative features for 3 different civilizations that they didn't know the names of. Just looking at the access to water, the kinds of government, did they have taxes? And they were ultimately going to use that information to make a decision about where they would want to settle. So the next stage is I put them in their like groups. So they made a decision where they wanted to settle, in Civilization A, Civilization B, or Civilization C. So they regrouped into their groups, and then they collectively brainstormed. If you see in the center pictures, they collectively brainstormed what features they wanted to point out when they were doing their final discussion and debate. What were the positive and negative features that they wanted to make sure that they included when they were talking? So I'm going to share with you 2 video clips of my students having that kind of second stage discussion. And then here's the second group. So what you notice is they were preparing on the computer, but they also had a printed copy when they were meeting with their groups. And they had markers and chart paper so they could start making their notes for what they wanted to do. So in the final stage, I actually stood in the middle of the room, and the students had to convince me with their persuasion words that we had talked about whether or not I wanted to come to their civilization. So as they said something positive or convincing, I would step closer to their civilization. But they had the opportunity to point out the negatives for the other civilizations. So it was a very powerful discussion. And they would say, well, even though that civilization has lower taxes, their government's corrupt. So they really started to point out and analyze the different features of the different civilizations. So the next thing I want you to do is, in the chat feature, if you could just chat me like a few of the discussion types that you might be using in your classroom with your students right now. I'll just give you about a minute to think of any kind of styles of discussion that you use and just put them in the chat feature. Okay, so I'm going to share a couple with some pictures from my kids and some diagrams. So hopefully you can find one that you might want to take back and use with your students. So the first one is the snowball discussions. And this one I like because it gives everybody a chance to participate. So what you see here is the students are discussing with a partner. So thanks, Amy. I see your Socratic seminar. We'll talk about that one in a few minutes. The students keep talking to each other. Then the next stage, they pair with another group of two. So now there's a group of 4. And they continue in this discussion. They were talking about which source they wanted to use when they were answering our compelling question for the unit that we were just finishing. So when the group of 4 has a couple minutes to discuss, 2 groups of 4 go together. And in this picture, there's a group of 8. And they were having the discussion and the conversation continuing. And then the final stage, just because my class sizes are large, I have about 28 to 34, depending on the class, I chose to do 2 smaller groups instead of 1 large, because a group of 34 is a little bit harder to manage. So you can see they were still having the same discussion. I actually have them move away from their computers and sit on the floor and face everybody in a circle so that everybody feels included. So the next one is what I call a tabletop discussion, and this one's done on paper. It has some flexibility. I use the large chart paper, groups of about 3 to 5 people. I think you don't want to have too large of a group, but I pose 1 question for everybody to answer, or you can have multiple questions on, like a question on each paper divided up between the groups. So the students start out on their original group, they write their thoughts and comments and questions on the paper, and then you have them rotate with at least 1 member staying at that paper so they can answer any questions or clarify, but then the other groups can continue to build off that information. It can be done gallery walk style if you have the papers that you can put up on the walls. I have whiteboards around my room, so a lot of times I'll put a question on each of the whiteboards and they have to walk around and answer. So that's another resource you can use. Just slide this. The next one is what's called concentric circles. Concentric circles is nice because that gives a lot of students an opportunity to kind of borrow ideas from somebody else. So the way concentric circles work is divide your class in half, put half in the outer circle, half in the inner circle, have the inner students face the out circle, and then they can discuss. I do this a lot with even vocabulary review, where the person on the inside has to pick one of the words and they give the definition, and the person on the outside has to guess which vocabulary word. We've done it where they can do opinions or questions. They can answer that discussion question. And then the next stage, if you notice, everybody shifted 1 spot counterclockwise. So they have the opportunity to discuss. So let's say student 1 was talking to student 10 first. In the next round, if student 1 really liked something that student 10 said, they can share that with student 11 as well. So they're getting ideas. So if you have that student that's a little bit shyer or maybe not as academically successful and they don't participate a lot because they're not sure, they can use those ideas from other students. And then again, rotate again, and you can rotate as many or as few times as you want, but it gives the students a chance to talk with different students one-on-one, have that personal conversation in a little bit different of a way. So the next one is the Socratic seminar that Amy mentioned. This one is, I think, a little more open-ended. The students can come prepare with those questions. You can give them questions. You have the flexibility as a teacher to do 1 large Socratic seminar or smaller groups. It's designed to be more student-driven. So this is definitely one of the ones that I think that the students have to have a lot of time, or at least enough time to prepare to be an active participant in the discussion. Another one is a fishbowl technique. Very similar to Socratic seminar, only there's an inner circle that does the discussion and the outer circle does more of the observing. What I like to do with my fishbowl is I make it tag team. So I usually have 3 people on a team. 1 is in the fishbowl and 2 are observing. But if they want to be able to participate, they can tag in to their person and they can rotate through. So it's just a fun way. The boys seem to like it. As soon as I say tag team, they connect to WWE and they get all excited. The newness wears off, so I always try to like switch it up a little bit, but it's a neat way to get a lot of different people to participate. So think, pair, share is a common one that's been around in education for several years. You do the partner work, discuss it, and then you can share out whole group. I like to use the snowball discussions a little bit better because it gives them more opportunities to talk versus before they get to the share out stage. The next one I want to show you is clock partners. And I know as a teacher, sometimes it's hard for all of the students to find a partner, and then you're wasting like a minute or two where they're trying to find their partner. So with clock partners, it is already set up, predetermined. You tell them, find your 3 o'clock partner. They look at their clock, find who their partner is, and then they find a spot to discuss. So you can do this one of 2 ways. I tend to use the clock on the left because they have 4 clock partners, and then I rotate clock partners every quarter. So the hard part is the first time you do this is the students just start writing random kids' names down, but they have to understand if I have Melissa as my 12 o'clock partner, I need to have my name on her paper as her 12 o'clock partner. So they get it rather quickly. If you are not one to kind of change things every quarter, you can use the clock on the right. So they have a clock partner for every hour, and you can just mix up which hour clock partner they want to meet with. So no more of, oh, I don't know who my partner is. Oh, look, that student who's really shy looking around the room going, oh, I don't have a partner. Is somebody going to pick me? Am I going to get picked last? This kind of takes that anxiety away and helps facilitate the discussions a little bit faster. So the last one is philosophical chairs. And this is one very similar to what I did with the decision-making activity, only I had 3 areas in my image. I'm showing you 2. So the students have to pick a position, and you're always going to have those students who say, oh, but I'm for and against. And I always say, you have to take a stand. You have to pick one side or the other. So you can allow in an option, you can allow your students to move. So let a couple people share why they're for or why they're against and say, okay, you have 10 seconds to think. If you want to move, give them another 10 seconds to move to the other side. But then they have to also change their perspective. Another option is to not allow them to move. This is what I did in my decision-making activity. They had to pick a civilization, stay there, but then spent the last 15 minutes trying to persuade me to choose their civilization over the other 2. So the next thing I want to show you that's nice about Active Classroom is you can pick and have discussions where students come prepared reading different sources. I think our English counterparts do this very well with literature circles, and there's nothing that says we can't do a literature circle style discussion and preparation in social studies as well. We use the literacy standards, we connect to literacy, so this is a great way to incorporate those kinds of activities. So the first search that you see up on your screen is one that I did with the Holocaust. You can see that there's multiple sources, so I can assign, these are generally the same lexile level, so I could assign all 5 of them and let them choose. Another search that I did is with Hammurabi's code. So being able to look at, there's a primary source, there's an interview, there's a reading, you can assign somebody a video, And there's several ways you can assign it as the teacher. If you have your students sorted into groups, if you have a below grade level group, an on grade level group, above grade level group, then you can choose to assign the specific text to that particular group of students. Another option, which I stole from an English teacher, they do book talks. Do a mini book or source talk on each of the 3 or 4 or 5 sources that you're going to do, and let them choose. A lot of times when students feel they have a choice, even if it's a little bit harder, they want to rise to that occasion. A lot of our students really do want to do well, and it has the read to features. So if it's the vocabulary that they're going to struggle with and the decoding, the audio version can help them. A third option, have students draw a card when they come in. So when you're assigning it, assign the students all 5, but number it 1 and then the title of the activity, and 2, the title of the activity, and 3. And as they're coming in, when they get that playing card or the slip of paper with the number on it, that corresponds with the source that they're going to read. And then you can regroup them so that there's a variety, maybe 1 or 2 of each person reading that particular source, so you have it well represented. Maybe you have groups of 10. If you have 5 articles, you have 2 from each source. So it gives a lot of flexibility to you as the teacher to make the decision that's going to be the best for your classroom. So I want to help you and think about this, another quote, an ancient Chinese proverb. And there's lots of versions of this floating around, but thinking about your students, thinking about the lessons that you're going to be preparing in the next several weeks. So take a second to read the quote. So as you're preparing for your future lessons, think about those opportunities that you can involve the students, help them understand and connect with each other, connect with the content or the text. I know that every day we go to work, we do what we think is best for the students in our class, and getting them involved, allowing them the opportunity to understand is the best thing that we can do to help our students be successful. So we're nearing the end. So if there's any questions, I want to take a moment to answer any questions that I can. So go ahead and use that chat feature. Irene, I'm seeing your turn and talk kind of comment from before. Thank you. All right, so hopefully you have some new discussion strategies or some newfound motivation to try discussions with your kids. Hopefully you maybe rediscovered something that maybe you had forgot about or heard about. So in closure, I want to borrow this idea from another active classroom presenter, Montre, who did this in one of the first 2 webinars, which I thought was very powerful. And before you leave, I want you to share maybe how your thinking's been changed, how maybe something you heard from me today confirmed what you had been thinking, or even share something that you're going to take back and use with your students. And Melissa, I can turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Carla. Wow. You know, I work with mostly only kindergartners, and I have gotten a few things that I think I'm going to try to use with them for some discussion, because the earlier they can learn to share their books and share their thinking, the better. So I appreciate all those great ideas. Fabulous. Thank you so much. And thank you, Amy, for your comment.
Yes. Thank you, Amy. I'm glad you found something that you could take away and use with your kiddos. Shannon,
Yeah.
the snowball feature is fabulous. I'm glad you're going to use that.
I love this sharing of ideas and how what you do can change others and enhance others. So I appreciate everyone once again joining. And thank you so much, Carla. That was fabulous. I really appreciate you all being here tonight. And I hope everyone has an excellent night. And I'll go ahead and close down. We are going to have this recorded, so we will be posting it if you need to look back at things later or if you want to share it with some of your colleagues. So it will be posted on our website and on YouTube. Have a great evening.